I'm going to go to Sameer, and then I'm going to ask Karen about China. But before I do, I just want to let the WEF know that I don't know what the time is. And so if someone can put a timer in.
I have a Finnish watch called Suunto, a little product placement here, a great sports watch, 30:37.
That's just so I know when we need to go to questions, if you can show, because we are going to go to questions. I want you to stand up when I call on you, say who you are, and I'll make sure that we get to a bunch of people. But please, Sameer.
So autocracies versus democracies is Americanism. It's the bumper sticker view of the world. And Americans love the bumper sticker. So that's global politics explained in a bumper sticker. So let's leave that aside. But I think the question here is that how long before will the world start blaming the West for the inflations that they are experiencing at home? Food security issues, energy crisis, economies tumbling down. And when will a larger chunk of the global 141 countries who voted for going to change their mind? And they're going to start beginning to realize that the weaponization of the financial system, SWIFT, energy, food, is not just a Russian action, it is also the response to the Russian action that is causing it. And I fear that may be another factor in the days ahead as the world realigns itself around this particular event.
So let me ask you, from your perspective, which of these geopolitical gaps is more structural and significant? The gap between Russia and the G7 or NATO, or the gap between the developed world and the developing world?
The latter.
Because?
You don't get us, and we don't get you. I think this...
Well, Russia and NATO don't get each other either, I mean, to be fair. So
Listen, that's a European problem. Solve it. Our problem is that globalization meant coming out of Europe, right? So I think the gap, the symmetry or the asymmetry in our understanding of many of the positions you have taken more recently as a group, as a continent, as a bunch of nations, seems to resonate less in many other parts of the world. And I think it could be a comms issue, and maybe we need to rework on how we communicate with each other. But it could also be that we are different. And that's why we have different sovereignties and constitutions. I mean, if I was American, I would have taken the American Constitution. We didn't, right? We built our own constitution. So we don't necessarily agree with how the world needs to be shaped. So I think there is a political realism that needs to also be injected into how we assess each other. We were meant to be different people. That's why we chose our own ways of managing ourselves. We decided to engage in trade and be good to each other and communicate and travel, and we need to continue to strengthen that. But to somehow assume that because we signed on to the WTO, we all agree to how the world must look like in the future, the homogeneity is not going to be there. It's going to elude us.
So Karen, you look like you want to get in on that. I'll let you do that before I ask you about China. Go ahead.
Just 2 quick points. I mean, it's interesting, Sameer, you didn't blame China for the pandemic in many ways, and that's sort of...
I did. I wrote like 6 papers on it.
Okay, no, just now.
But no one retweeted it, so I stopped mentioning it.
Okay, no, it's just that there's a lot of blame that can go around, right? All over the world. I mean, it's not just... and China hasn't taken any responsibility for potentially turning an endemic into a pandemic, I mean, epidemic, sorry. But... You know,
and the Indians are on record as generally not liking the Chinese at this point. The Quad is kind of based on that, right? So we have that.
The West versus the rest, it's more, there's Russia and China, and I think China is sort of second-guessing some of its, close embrace right now of Russia. Then there's the West, and then there's the former non-aligned movement in a way that is probably going to act in a similarly non-aligned way that it used to, and not necessarily sign up for everything. And so what we may end up with, which is kind of an interesting return to political science theory, for those of you who studied David Matrani, is a form of functionalism where different countries and groupings come together for a common purpose, and then when that purpose is over, it ends. I mean, I don't think many people think that the UN can solve any of these problems anymore, right? So people talk about global governance. The UN has not just failed in this particular case, but it has failed over the last few decades in so many ways. I am a former UN employee. I'm a fan of the UN, but I'm deeply disappointed in the fact that it's not able to provide the global leadership that we need in a time like this. Even the Secretary General today has been doing an amazing job trying to get people out of Mariupol, but more of the time than not, he admires the problem rather than tries to lead and provide that kind of good offices.
Alex, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I guess one of the problems is that the multilateral system, which was created in a bipolar Cold War with the Soviets and the Americans, were created sort of in the image of the victors of World War II. I mean, you can pose the question that why is France, why is the UK sitting in the UN Security Council, right? I mean, you can pose the question legitimately now, 70 plus years later, and if you want to have a rules-based system, you need to have the bigger players have some kind of role as well. I know this is a little bit paradoxical and some people push back on this, but I think we need to start thinking about that a little bit. A couple of additional points. On China, I don't think, I met Xi Jinping a couple of times when he was vice president, and I think I was foreign minister. I think he wasn't very happy that this took place because he wanted to focus on domestic things. Two things, actually. Zero COVID policy, which is going to fail totally because you can't contain a virus. And then the party congress in October, November. Now, does he want Putin to lose? No. But I think Russia will become, if I may, a bit of a vassal state to China. China is not going to, a lot of people say it's going to pivot to Russia. No, it's not. It's going to oscillate between the two, the West and Russia, because it wants to avoid secondary sanctions, because the business stock in Europe is 800 billion per annum, whereas in Russia it's under 80 billion. What it will do is the normal Chinese thing. In other words, create path dependencies inside Russia. So when we go out because of sanctions and power vacuums emerge, boom, the Chinese will go in and do the investment. So that's why I'm saying there's a lot of interesting shifts going on in this whole package.
And so, Karen, do you see the Chinese, on balance, as having more opportunities that come out of this crisis, or is it much more of a challenge for them?
It's a great question. I actually think China could have an incredible opportunity. I think President Xi is one of the only people that Putin listens to or is even afraid of. And if China were able to put pressure on Putin to end this war somehow, not only would China emerge in the global leadership position that many think it has come to, being now a superpower, playing a positive role, but it would also go a long way to repair its relationship with the United States. So it could be a fundamental shift if China can play that role. Now, at the moment, I don't see China interested in playing that role, and it hasn't indicated that it would. If anything, you watch Chinese media and they just repeat a lot of the Russia propaganda. So they're not there yet, but it doesn't mean they can't be there.